Welcome to the show, Lucas. I am extremely excited to have a friend and fellow Canadian on the show, which is always fun. Typically, the conversations are with people, over the border. So having a fellow Canadian on the show is always a good time. So thank you so much for coming on today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, do you think there's a pattern of Canadians and beards, or do you think Americans, Canadians, or worldwide and Canadians, the beard ratio is the same?
I'm just trying to think. I feel like we got some cooler weather up north, so I feel like beards
Yeah,
are a little bit more
I
common.
think they're a little more in style up here.
But as I lost
You're
it up
looking good.
top, I had to start to just grow the beard. It
You got to
was
make up
the
for
only
it. I
thing I
get
could
it.
do.
Overcompensate. Yeah, I get
Awesome,
it.
awesome. All right, so I got some notes here, and I'm super excited for the topic for the show today. But I would love to just to kind of segue into things, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of digging into the background a little bit, give everybody a little bit of context on who Lucas is and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I'll make it really, really quick. Small town Kamloops. My parents immigrated over here. I had super hardworking parents, which taught me the power of hard work, which got me so far. And then at some point, I realized hard work caps you at some point, and you need to start working smarter. Did the blue collar stuff forever, roofing, framing, painting. I did the interior. This is the worst job ever, where you had to you were the cutter. So before the painters came in, you'd have to cut around all the switches and all the corners, and then
Oh,
the painters would
Jesus.
come in and paint it. Did the oil rigs for 5 years, and it was 24, 25. People have mixed feelings about Grant Cardone, and that's fine. But I remember reading the 10X book, and Grant Cardone wasn't that big yet. He was just starting to get out of his situation he got in with real estate. And I read that book, and I remember being feeling like a loser in a good way though, in a motivational way, being what am I doing? And I quit the oil rigs, and I just decided to 10x my life, right? Just hustle. And the only thing I knew back then was fitness. So I started a fitness business. Eventually that turned into an online business. Eventually that turned into other fitness trainers and coaches being how did you do that? It was kind of not in the early days of online business, but I definitely caught the trend. That's back in the day when you could run a Facebook ad to a messenger on Facebook, and it was $2, and it would start messages for you and you just answer back. So I just had ads running to people would message to inquire, and that's where I'd go back and forth with them and sell them into something if it was a good fit. Did the online marketing thing, kind of got a little bit bored of that, got into crypto, DeFi, and now we're here. And I think, like you, during the last few years, I kind of went on an exploration of what's next when you get to kind of a place where you wouldn't have to work for quite a while. I think the conversation, you're not motivated by money, and it's the conversation is what do I really want to contribute to the world? And I hope I never am off that journey, because it's exciting to create things that you're excited by and passionate by. So now we're kind of here.
Yeah, I love it. That journey kind of starts to give you perspective on so many things in terms of why you do what you do, who you help, who you enjoy helping, and that exploration of all of that is never ending, or it shouldn't be, hopefully, in a
Yeah, but I
perfect
don't
world,
think
but
it does,
it's
man.
yeah.
I thought it would at some point. I was oh, it might, when I get to 10K, when I get to 50K, when I have 250 grand in my bank, when I have $500,000 in my bank, then I'll be good. And I actually realized, and I've talked to some people who make $5 million, $10 million a year, and they were there is actually more responsibility. And most people miss the early days of sitting in the basement and drumming up your first business. And I do miss those days, because there was literally nothing to lose, zero. And it was adventurous. And I guess at some point you start playing not to lose. And I started doing that. And then you stop innovating. You kind of, I don't know, you lose life force. And I had to get shooken up to say, hey, you're going to stop playing to lose, and you're going to start playing to win again. And that's a lesson that I'm going to keep for the rest of my life. Is if I ever get complacent, chilling, shake it up before, just initiate the change
Hmm.
before life pushes you over the edge.
And you teed that up perfectly, that journey of the 10K, 50K, and kind of going beyond. And then when people kind of amass that success, so many things change. And then you get, like you said, people start missing the contrast, the other end, less responsibility, being able to not have to worry about as much. And that was one of the things that when we went for coffee, right when we moved out to Vancouver, the part of the conversation that I really thought was interesting and I wanted to have you on to chat about was some of those arbitrary milestones we have as online entrepreneurs. And I just don't think people think about that transition as much as they really should. And you kind of segued into it
Right.
perfectly of we've got these milestones of trying to reach six figures in business, trying to hit $10,000 a month in business. And it's like, what does that mean? And I think people underestimate the amount of things that change as your business actually starts to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know you're a super fit dude because I've seen photos of you, and I know you come from that space. But like, I don't know if at some point in your life you weren't, because I know I wasn't, and then I got fit, and like you still feel like the same person. Like it's not like you all of a sudden like you don't feel different. Maybe your confidence is up a little because you got some money in the bank, or maybe you've got a little nicer body when you take your shirt off. But there's a lot of really good looking people who feel very ugly, and they're completely insecure, and you're like, you're so beautiful, yet you you think you're not. And I come from I did some acting and stuff, so I saw a lot of that, like the most beautiful people, and they felt insecure, and they felt like they had to keep getting more work done. And I think it's the same with um, money. And so I think all of us have probably had some transformation, but if you actually ask yourself if you felt different, you still look to the same eyes, and you still sort of seen the world the same way ish. I think money is the same, and maybe the online space, and I've fell victim to that too. Not victim. I think I've created that at times in my life. Like I've, I've given that message because I believed it, but I've also gotten seduced by it. Is when you get that next milestone in revenue, like you will feel better. You'll feel different. You've made it, and it was absolutely not the case for me. In fact, kind of like the person who's super attractive but doesn't feel like it, and now they're insecure. It just added to my insecurity, and it added to my imposter syndrome, and it added to like, what if I
Interesting.
lose this? Did I get lucky? So I think the online space is starting to sniff that out. Like, influencer marketing for so long like worked really well. I guess we have to define what influencer is because it still works, but the Lambo type stuff
Yeah.
is, and don't get me wrong, like I'm freaking buying a Lambo. That's one of my goals for this year, but it's like I know I'm gonna get this Lambo and I don't feel any different. Like it's gonna drive cool, but you're still the same person. And I think that message needs to be shared more because I thought I'd feel different too, but like you literally don't.
Yeah, and it's almost just things become normal because your life is different. I know even like for myself making $10,000 a month, nothing changed. Even though like in your head you set all of these arbitrary goals, and the most relative thing recently for myself that happened was I started getting really active on TikTok, and I had a couple posts that like for me went viral, like 200,000 views on TikTok for me
Oh,
is
that.
viral. And then all of a sudden getting 200 views just feels like nothing, feels like such a disappointment, feels like a failure. And it's like, whoa, wait, like when did going viral on every single post become the expectation? And I feel like
Yeah,
that can almost translate into very similar things where we just have the expectations of it's almost like that high. It never quite feels the same. So we keep searching and striving for that feeling again, but it
that's right.
becomes more difficult to achieve.
Totally. It's kind of like when you go on holiday. So I don't know, like all those times where I upgraded my lifestyle in some way, shape, or form, and then you're on the beach and you're in this beautiful place, and after 2 or 3 days, it kind of wears off, and then you almost kind of want to just go home. I've caught onto that pattern maybe 2, 3 years ago. That's why I went to the dispenser thing last year too, because I'm like, I want to learn how to create the feeling, so there's no lack, there's no gap,
Mm-hmm.
and I can do the work because I enjoy the process. I enjoy growth, and I do enjoy the work it takes to get, let's just say, the Lamborghini, but I'm fully complete and whole without it. And it's such a two conflicting thoughts that we have to hold. It's easy to get off that line, um, but I also do think that people have to go through that process. I think that's like the human experience. And so to tell someone, and maybe this is limited, but to if you would have told me at 24, hey, you're not going to feel any different, I wouldn't have believed you. And I had to experience that to realize that was right. And I think sometimes we just have to touch the stove. And I think there's certain milestones that maybe you do have to hit and you realize, okay, that wasn't. Tony talks about like the art of achievement and fulfillment, but it's like we learn achievement, but we don't learn fulfillment. And I think all we're going for is peace of mind. And nowadays, if there's revenue attached to stress, or if it's not super leveraged for me, I'm kind of like I just want peace of mind, and I want
Hmm.
quality of life, and I want to do things that inspire me. But if you have no money, you might have to do things that don't inspire you for a while till you get there. And sometimes that hunger and drive, it's a complex conversation because when you're on the other side of something, it's easy to say that's easy. But when you're here, it's not that easy. So I have grace and compassion for anyone who's at the start of their journey. And I think I'm at the start of the journey compared to the big mountain that's available to us. So I'm sure there's people that look at me and they're just like, I have compassion for you. You'll figure it out. Just give it a little time.
Yeah, I think the trickiest part for me is it's always somebody that has amassed what someone on the other side deems as a large amount of success and wealth. In so many cases, is the one teaching that, saying, it's nothing changes, you don't feel any different. But it's so difficult for somebody that hasn't
Totally.
been in that position to say, oh yeah, like you wouldn't have said that 4 years ago before you hit those milestones. But it's
Totally.
so difficult. There's never the person that is making $4,000 a month saying like it's okay. It's the person that's
Yeah.
making $4 million a year that has that
Yeah.
message.
Yeah. And then also, though, when I think about, I was just talking to someone 2 days ago about this or something, but I was, Vancouver. So in North Vancouver, have you gone to North Vancouver yet?
Yep.
To the
Yep.
Key and all that? North Vancouver, there's a main street. I forget what it is, Third or something, whatever that is. And then way over here, there's a anyway somewhere in North Van. I was living in a basement, and it was I just got off the oil rigs, and I had to kind of sell a bunch of stuff because I couldn't pay my bills. And I sold a 1968 Chevy C10, but it had a 4x4 frame, most beautiful truck I've ever owned. It was a sad day. I sold it to some dude because I had to pay rent, and I had a mountain bike I bought, and I spent a little extra. I think it was like 1,500 bucks because I wanted at least a cool mountain bike, and I used to ride it up to the grocery store, which is now a Save On or something, but it was a different grocery store then. And literally, I don't know if I ever had so much life force. I remember being 24, 25, and just being so excited by my life. And I'm losing all my things. And I'm living in this basement suite for 600. They don't want to date chicks because I'm not bringing them to there. And I'm riding my pedal bike to the grocery store, and I'd ride it down to the Key in the morning to like just get ready for the day. But I had so much energy because my vision was so big. And the thought of building a $10,000 a month, fitness business, I'd bank more than the rigs, and the idea of doing what I love, it was so inspiring. And then when I got there, and so I didn't operate from a place of lack because I was really excited by it. But when I got there, like that, the motivation started dropping because now I'm here, and I started learning the lesson of like how tall does a tree grow, as tall as it possibly can, and like before reaching that next milestone, setting the next milestone, so you have something to be pulled by. But I do think someone who's struggling can change their perspective of it and build a vision that's big enough to pull them out of bed and really, really excite them. And you literally have nothing to lose. And so I think it's really exciting times. Um, so yeah, I don't think it has to be like, uh, I think it can be painful, and pain is a good thing, like in the gym, but I don't think it has to be suffering when
Hmm.
you're starting something. I think we just create the suffering because we look at what everyone else is doing. But if you actually shut off all the noise and you just focus every day on what you have to do and you stop comparing yourself, it's a pretty enjoyable process, I think.
Yeah, I find that Like, honestly, if I could recommend one thing to every entrepreneur, it would be going to therapy. Would be just one of those things, like constant work on yourself. But it almost seems like, as we're kind of talking about this, that it's like the contrast of the extremes just brings so much appreciation for everything else. Like when you have it, you start to appreciate all of those things when you didn't have it. When you
Hmm.
have nothing and you're forced to hustle because you need to make ends meet, your drives and your passions and your whys and your reasons become so apparent and evident that you're able to create something. But it seems like when we're in that middle, when things are not too bad, they could maybe be better, it's kind of comfortable, that
Totally.
it's
Sucks.
way more difficult to really
Yeah.
find the drive to push through those places. And I'd love your perspective on that, because that's really kind of what it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked, I think, a little about this, but like 2022 was probably the most painful year of my life. Not because nothing was bad, but I literally had no direction, and I was like almost ashamed of it because I'm the guy who always has the big vision. But I had therapists, I had coaches, and they're just like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I honestly don't know. For the first time in my life, I actually don't know what I want, and I feel so lost." And that's what led me to the work of exploring the relationship with myself, which I never had time for when you're hustling, and becoming okay with not knowing what I want, like not tying my identity to always a big vision and always a big goal and striving. Although I enjoy going after something, that's just like that kind of masculine energy that I really, really love building something and going to war, so to speak. But when you do that for 8 years every single day, and then you sort of are okay, like I got complacent. I remember talking to Shanna, like I was eating chocolate at night, I was chips, I was kind of like in Mexico for 6 months, just started, lost all discipline really. And And I remember feeling very, very lost, and it was extremely frustrating and no motivation, no drive, no energy, stopped working out. And and I think it was like a little bit of a threshold of when you do something for the money and the P&L is the driver for so long, and then the money's kind of there. And I'm not saying I have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, but it was just like most purchases that you'd ever have to have, a car, whatever you want, I wouldn't have to think about it. Or I could take 5 years off and just live off whatever savings and yield off things. I think it was like, what do I really want to do? And yeah, it was painful. So I think I got to the vision stopped growing and it just got super complacent. And I think people get there in different levels. But and I've heard that story from so many people when they hit like close to that $1 million mark or $600,000 mark, and it's just like, hey, I make 25 grand profits a month and it's in my bank. Most people don't need more than 25 grand a month in profit into their bank every month. Like there's not many things you're going to need that exceed that. I think a lot of people go through that painful process, kind of like an athlete who switches identities, or a musician or actor who, you know, you know what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I have some experience with that. Um, Maybe kind of like that ego death, or I don't know. It was a really painful process. It was like 8 months of, I don't think I've ever felt that much pain on a daily basis, and everything was okay. Like it's like everything is okay, but I didn't know who I was, and so I think that was 2022. And at the end of 2022, the vision blew up bigger than I ever could. And it wasn't forced vision. It was always forced before. This was more sit back and kind of catch the vision, like Michael Beckwith would say. And and not a day goes by where I don't spend 20, 30 minutes just catching little visions and clues, because I'm never going back to what that felt like. Um, it was worse than the rigs. And the rigs was like the lowest point of my life. So
But
yeah, I'm
do
really
you
big on
think
vision.
though, that you could have gotten to the place you are in now without it? So in retrospect, we don't ever want to go back, but do you think you could have got to where you are now without going through that process Do you think it was a prerequisite to being able to catch that vision and that vision presenting itself?
Yeah, probably. I think you can compress the time. Like maybe if I wasn't so stubborn, I can be pretty stubborn. Sometimes it just has to be my way, and I need to learn it the hard way, and whatever. But but yeah, I think for me, I probably had to get through it. I think I could have compressed the time a little bit. I don't think I would have had to draw it out so long. I even had some good friends or people like give me very good nuggets. They're extremely intuitive without telling me, like they weren't preaching, but gave me
Mm-hmm.
nuggets. And on the other end of it, I'm like, all of these nuggets, why did I not listen to them? But yeah, I do think you have to go through the process. And recently, my relationship with pain has changed. As in, like I think, like when a caterpillar is turning into a butterfly, like I don't know what it feels, but I could think it's sort of painful and weird and awkward, and like I don't know what it feels, but so I guess there's an element to that. Yeah, I don't think life is meant to be joyous and kumbaya and happy and butterflies and rainbows every day. Um, that's kind of like toxic positivity type stuff. Like it's not. It does get hard, but there's some enjoyment through the process of it.
Yeah, and before we jumped on, like I was looking at just some statistics, and in Canada, the top 5% of earners earn 120 or more thousand.
No doubt. Yeah,
So
I don't know.
like we talk about these milestones of like trying to hit this $10,000 a month, and it's like at $10,000 a month in Canada, it's a little bit more in the US, and I'm assuming it's due to population, but
Yeah.
you are in the top 5% across the
Mm,
country at that milestone. And
yeah.
that's like the baseline that people are trying to achieve. And top
Yeah.
5% is, I would say, a fairly significant milestone to be able to achieve the top 5% earners in the entire country. It's just so
Right.
interesting when these things that I think a lot of people don't explore a whole lot, when you start to unpack it, it's like that's actually a lot. Like the believe something like the median income in Canada is around like
Yeah.
$49,000 a year or something like that.
I'm also kind of careful with that though, because if you looked up health stats, I don't know what the average person's health stat is, but it's probably pretty subpar.
Mm-hmm.
Like the kind of status quo or whatever of depth of relationship with your significant other. Guessing it's probably pretty subpar. We've kind of like drifted off into this okayish kind of being okay with just being here. So I get that, like I get the average median and counting our blessings of like, hey, at least I can breathe and I'm healthy. But I do think that with the internet, the opportunity to rise above that median is not it's not easy, but it's not impossible. And I also think that we live in a world where so many people want instant gratification and want it easy that it also gives the advantage to the person who's like, no, I don't mind it hard, and I don't need it easy. And I mean, people are rising out of complete poverty through the internet in countries all around the world because they have
Mm-hmm.
that drive and retiring their parents. I just yeah. So I've been careful with obviously just my opinion, like the median anything because I think the bar is set very very low. But yes, counting your blessings, and if you make over 100 grand in profit, which is a big difference, I'm sure we'll talk about that. But if you made 100 grand in profit and you're still complaining, then you have issues. Um, you can probably cover most things, and you're doing pretty well. And count your blessings. And then for those who want more, like go
Mm-hmm.
after more. Like don't get more
Yeah.
just for more. But yeah,
Yeah, that no, that's interesting, and I'd love to kind of dig into a little bit more of the like the tactical, specific stuff. And it's so interesting when you said 100 grand in profit, and I think that's something that because we live in this world of comparison is so common with social media and people posting pictures of Lamborghinis, and I don't care if they're rented, whatever. Let people kind of do their own thing. But I think it's so interesting because I've worked as a consultant for a lot of different businesses, and like I've peeked behind the curtain of some businesses, and there was one specifically, they were doing $120,000 a month in revenue, not profit, revenue. and they were a digital business, 100% online business, and their profit margin was 7%.
Yeah, it's painful.
And like, I think it's a lot of people don't quite understand like the expenses that are associated with these businesses. So like, just for me, I was just kind of like
Yeah.
breaking some things down. So if just kind of like trying to tie back like these things that change once we kind of start to surpass that $10,000 a month. Like last month, I spent $1,800 in subscriptions. So that's like email software, Zoom, ClickFunnels, like those things just add up way too fast.
Yeah.
And then you got money in ads, you've got your team. So I think we had like $2,500 a month going out for like teams like designers, assistants, and like video editors, podcast editors, taxes. And you think
Yeah.
of the person that might be doing like 6 or 7 with doing everything themselves compared to somebody trying to start that scale process. There's
Yeah.
definitely a messy middle that people just
Big time.
overlook what is actually involved. Like 10K can get chopped down so fast with the
Totally.
expenses on an online business.
Totally. I'll give a so over the last the first time I realized that was do you know Bedros Keuilian? Because you're
Yes.
in the fitness space.
Yep.
When I was in fitness, I used to go to his yearly fitness boot camps or whichever it was called. It was fitness something. Anyway, and he'd have speakers there, and I was a trainer. And this is alternative universe. This is what I'm about to say is made up in my imagination. But let's just say I was, choosing to take cash from clients because I wanted to save up cash. So I could potentially in an alternate universe ask clients if they want to pay me cash and no invoice, whatever, on an alternative universe. And let's just say that you were collecting that cash and trying to store it up because I wanted to start a gym. And so I'm storing this cash. In an alternative universe, I had a safe in my house storing up cash. And I remember going to the fitness boot camp, being like, I'm going to start a gym. I had 50 grand cash or something. And then I was talking to gym owners they were on stage talking about their $1 million success. They built $1 million business. And then I asked, like, okay, how much do you take home? And they were taking home, 80 grand, 100 grand, 120 grand, the ones who were honest. And I was taking that home. I was working 10 hours a day, but I was reeling in the cash. And I kind of sat down and I was like, okay, I could start a gym. And when I ran the numbers, I'm like, I don't know, this seems pretty complex to make what I'm making now. That's why I went online, because when I could get online clients, start kind of group stuff and lifestyle coaching, I'm like, that's 100% margin and I could start leveraging myself in some way. So I went online instead. So I kind of had exposure to that and I understood it, but it wasn't until I met a dude named Tim Francis. He runs Profit Factory Coaching. And I want to do him proud because he's been pounding this in my head. I've worked with him for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. I can be pretty stubborn. He's taught me a lot about like running a company and not just a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the exercises he drives home a lot is like there's a big difference between obviously revenue, profits, and free cash. Because just because you made 20 grand in profits into your business that month, it's not all free cash. You've got some goes to taxes, some goes to maybe some future expenses you have, some goes. So free cash number is much less than even your profits. The other concept he drove home a lot was step costs. So there's kind of an intersection. Let's say you're working solo, you've got 10 clients, you're working 30 hours a week and you're making 15,000 a month and your profits are maybe $10,000 a month you're taking home. And maybe you can take on two more clients. Maybe you could get to 18,000 a month, but at some point you can't do it yourself. First step is maybe you'd find some scalable solutions, software that scales, maybe a part-time VA, and try to keep your costs low. But at some point, you're gonna incur a big step cost. You might have to hire someone full-time, might have to get a bigger office, whatever that may be, and that might add a 5, 6, $7,000 a month step cost. And there's going to be this kind of valley where, if you're listening, I guess you can't see me drawing in the air, but there's going to be this valley where you were at 80 or 90% efficiency. So your profits margins were like at 95% efficiency. Now you incur a step cost, and it's going to be sort of this dark, chaotic time where you might even be making less than you were, but it's an investment.
Mm-hmm.
And like an investor, you're investing into the future of the business, and you have to kind of make it through this chasm until that person gets busy enough with enough clients, or your business is back at maybe 30,000 or 40,000 a month, and now you'll enjoy not as high profit margins, but you'll be taking more profit home because you're making more type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of understood it early where I would save up cash knowing that I was going to incur a nice big next step cost when the business was going to go through the next growth season, and I wouldn't be hit with this anxiety of I'm not making as much or I'm losing money every month. So there's been times in the business, even at 30,000 a month, 40,000 a month, where I wasn't paying myself because I was in growth mode. But I prepared for it, having 50 grand in cash to sort of make it through this interesting period. And I think people don't really think that far ahead. So all these expenses start wrapping up and they get overwhelmed by it because they didn't think about it. And I think everyone has their limit to where they want to get to on that. And I think you have to have an end game. So I see a coaching business as you flow cash to invest it in something because you're probably not going to coach for the rest of your life. Maybe you will, but it's a pretty intensive business it's a cash flowing business, a personal brand. At some point, if you get sick, your personal brand could cease existing type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw it as, let me get to like my maximum number where I can maybe take home 30, 40 grand a month, which at one point we were doing around 40,000 in profits. So I'm dumping money into cash and then investing it. And eventually some of those investments would pay for my lifestyle. And then I could choose, what do I want to do now? And you see a lot of people in the coaching space, if they're smart enough, they do that because that gives them options. And then maybe they start a company or they start something else or a software business or who knows. And they stop being the face of a business. So I think those two things, if people just understood that, is don't look at someone's screenshot of revenue because that means nothing. Ask about the profits. Think about the step cost. Map your business out like a few step costs ahead so you can actually have a bit of a vision to work towards. And understand that free cash, and to Tim's point, because Tim pounded this in my head with coaching, if you paid me 10 grand to work with me for 6 months, let's say, and I took that 10 grand and then I spent it, that 10 grand was not profit. It wasn't mine to begin with. I have to work with you for 6 months and deliver for 6 months. And so if I go spend that 10 grand and in a month I get sick or you don't want to work with me anymore, I don't care if the contract says there's no refunds. It's pretty bad business to not work something out there. But now I don't have the cash. And so even in our business, we kind of have membership businesses now, so it's different. But if I make 80 grand in a month of clients wanting to work with us for a 6-month program, let's say $60,000 for 6 months I made, I'd only pay $10,000 of that out into the bank account every month because that's actually earned revenue. And I didn't earn it yet. I'll earn it over 6 months. And I think a lot of people in our space will sell out an event, take the cash, go do something with it. And if there's an issue with the event, when COVID happened, we had to cancel one of our events. Refunds were easy to do because I had the cash sitting there. It wasn't like a hard decision for me to refund people. It was like, it wasn't ours to begin with. Here you go. And I just think people don't understand business enough they make some pretty poor decisions when it comes to finances and find themselves in tricky situations. And Tim Francis has helped me a ton with that. So I want to give him a shout out.
Yeah, I love that. The step costs, I think, is so important for every entrepreneur because it's so easy to slap the title on you. If you accept cash, you're a sole proprietor, and hypothetically, you're an entrepreneur. But to actually build a business, and it's open to interpretation how that's defined, but there's so many things that go into it, and it's very difficult to push through some of those periods where you're going to, like, you have choices. You can try and push through yourself without incurring expenses, and then you risk burning out, which is going to set you back. You now, if you do take on those expenses, like, it is a total change in your mindset and how you're approaching business, because now you're making less money, which is very difficult for people to do when we're in this game of trying to make more
Right.
money. But then also there's your role starts to shift as well. You're not necessarily the one, as you start to build a team, your roles and responsibilities change. Now you have to learn how to hire, how to fire, how to manage. And those
Totally.
are skill sets that are a lot more difficult, like than if you were a personal trainer. That's a lot more difficult to do than putting together an exercise
Totally.
program or a nutrition plan. It's a completely different skill set that you need to learn and adopt to push through those points in business growth.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, like Tim Todd, and I just give him so much credit because it got me out of playing an amateur and starting to attempt to play pro. I mean, I'll admit I'm not the greatest leader. In fact, I think when the business gets to one point, I would hire a full-time CEO. I really like to invent and build things and kind of, I don't like a calendar that's full of meetings and I don't really care. Um, I assume that role and I've been learning the skill set enough to be dangerous enough with it. But at the second I can spend 250 or 300 grand a year and get a CEO who would run the organization, that'll be my big first huge hire like that, who would deal with all that. And I could just sit here like a mad scientist and build cool programs or whatever. So I've identified that and I know that enough about myself. But like Tim would say, I mean, just understanding your numbers and we have meetings every week and there's just some really simple spreadsheets, more like CEO work, but I think people should do it from the day one of their business. Is just having some basic metrics to track, some basic numbers to track, understanding how much cash is in the bank, understanding where they're at over the next 3 months of cash, projected sales. It just adds so much clarity that when you have a bad week or a bad month, we're taught in every 2 weeks we get a paycheck. Most people get a paycheck every 2 weeks, and we pay rent or mortgage once a month. We have a car payment once a month, and we're taught to think in 2 weeks or 1 month. And if we don't get a paycheck for 2 weeks in as an employed human, we would kind of stress out about it because we count on those paychecks. Sharan Srivatsa, who one when I used to podcast, he was on a podcast and he gave me this one thing probably 6 years ago that I took to heart. He built like $1 billion empire in California, real estate, turned it around in 4 years. Super smart dude, super humble. Pretty sure he drove a Prius back then, and he was super successful. Um, he was like, I tell everyone to have 12 months of cash. Now that's different. We call that the buffer, or we call that kind of the we'll just call it the buffer. I like to have around 6 months, and I think everyone should work to building a bit of a buffer, whatever that means for them, to be able to make longer term decisions and not freak out because their sales are down for 2 weeks. You will make very different decisions if you're freaking out. You'll probably make poor decisions and you'll do things that don't add value long term. So to me, that's one of the first things I do is after tax, everything. This is just a pocket of cash that's 6 months in the business. And and then we work out the free cash and and that's that. And even if it's due to inflation losing 10% per year, I'll pay the 10% cost for the
Mm-hmm.
peace of mind in knowing that even if we decided to shut something down, last year we shut like a $60,000-$70,000 a month offer down. I don't care. We've got 12 months to build something new, and long term, what we're building will yield way greater returns than keeping doing what we were doing. So
Yeah, I think
most people are 2 weeks away from complete collapse, which is fine if you're just starting. Hustle out of that, but don't buy the upgrades, don't buy the newer car,
yeah.
don't go on the holiday. Like it's not worth it, my opinion. At least get 3 months and set that cash aside and now make decisions knowing you have a bit of a runway. And I think everyone's runway will be different based upon the risk tolerance. So
Yeah, I think that there are so many people that I know personally that they're still learning the lesson of like, I need to set money aside to pay my taxes. But
totally.
like, I played that game for years of getting that
Me
bill and
too.
just being like, fuck, like now
Me too.
you're back paying for like the first 6 months of the year, trying to pay off the interest that you
Totally.
owed from the previous year. And then getting into the mindset, like that was a big game changer maybe probably 2 or 3 years ago, like finally getting ahead in finances and having money set aside. And then you just start to learn, like, okay, I need 3 to 6 months set aside for my expenses personally. But then as you grow, it's like, well, I also need a buffer in my business because I have an
Yes.
assistant. I have like,
Yes.
I need to still put up my podcast and my videos if our revenues down. I can't just fall off the face of the earth. So you also need a buffer in your business as well, not just
Yeah.
personally. Like your roles and responsibilities of a business owner span so far beyond
Crazy.
just the work you're doing as like a technician. Like
You're
it's
not told that when you first start. Like
yeah.
you think, I knew nothing about that. And no one even, like all the marketing businesses were just about marketing and sales, which is totally legitimate when you're first starting. That's the only thing you should focus on is marketing and sales, rinse and repeat. But at some point, you literally cross a threshold. I've experienced this where your profitability is not going up and you can make more sales, but you've got leaks all over the place, and it's just like you're now just running in circles. And so again, I think that number is obviously different for every kind of business. E-com is very different, but if it's a service-based business, I think like keeping the margins healthy, doing most of the work yourself at first, and like
Mm-hmm.
learning all the little trades. Like you don't need the perfectly branded PDF. You can just do it on Canva, like whatever, and store up the cash. If you get your first $5,000 client, I've seen people do this. They go celebrate and they go on holiday, and I'm like, first of all, the $5,000 is probably only $3,000 after tax. Then you've got expenses, and you spent $2,500 on a holiday. So you literally are you back to square one when you come back,
Mm-hmm.
and the holiday is quickly going to fade because you have to face reality of now I have to do this all over again, and I don't know where my next client's coming from. I think you can feel the feeling of the freedom of a holiday without going on the holiday if you do enough work on yourself, or you can do smaller little things. And I'm not someone who's cheap, and I've never had a budget in my life, still don't. I know where my money's going, but I've never been someone to like work out my budget and this is how we spend for food. I have no idea. But I'm pretty aware of larger expenses, and I can easily um, not get the Lambo. Like if I can't buy three of them cash, I'm not buying one of them. I'm just not. It's not worth it. It's going to sit in the garage, and a week later, that the transmission's going to blow up, and then I'm stressed out. And what's the point of having the Lambo? Like there's literally no point of having whatever it is you want. To me, it's peace of mind again, and having options and not having to make a sale or work with someone. The best feeling in the world was firing a client I didn't want to work with. I literally didn't need their money, and I refunded them fully after 2 weeks. And it was like the best feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Like it empowered me to, like it was empowering. I don't have to work with you.
Yeah, I think that those things are so important. And I think it starts to go into as you start to become more knowledgeable and intelligent on these things, it also starts to change the way that you approach building your business. So I know like the transitions you've made in terms of transitioning into membership models where it does change the dynamic. You don't have to issue refunds the same way because they're not as large sum payments. You have monthly recurring revenue, that you have consistency on a month to month basis. We've started to transition into something similar. In this year, I've started to really focus on building my brand and kind of the mentality I've been approaching it, and kind of trying to think of if this is something that I could like speak to other people about. But taking some of your profits from what you make and investing them into certain things in your business that give you leverage. So investing into building your email list so that if you don't have clients, you have a pool of people that you can go and sell to.
I like that.
Investing into your content to build your brand so that potentially in 3 years, you might be able to make $4,000 a month in affiliate revenue from your YouTube channel.
I
Starting
like
to
that.
develop more leveraged assets in
Yeah.
your business so that you're not just responsible yourself 100% for delivering every single thing that you do.
I like that. I think everyone has a realization. Like I remember going on holiday. I don't really enjoy holidays because my life is a holiday, but we went to Mexico, and I didn't enjoy it because I had to do things. And I was like, okay, this needs to change. Not that I don't want to work, but I want to have the option to not work.
Mm-hmm.
How can I start building out leverage? How can I start chopping up an offer and designing three different products from it? And maybe some are a little more passive. Some people are like, well, if I have a $50 course and I only sell 10 of them, it's only $500. But I'm like, you do understand that you probably have to put up $60,000 with 20% down and take on leverage of probably $350,000 for a rental property, plus all the stress of tenants and everything to make maybe $500 of profits from your income property. You do understand that? Oh, well, I never thought of it that way. We're just bombarded by millions of dollars. But if I can find, I just signed, it's an affiliate thing I just did. It makes $300 a month for me right now. And I'm stoked on it. I'm like, it's $300 a month. I just bought myself another property
Mm-hmm.
through this affiliate kind of deal. And if I can have 15 or 20 of those, great. Now that's $12,000 a month. And my income has become much more leveraged where, and we don't have to talk about this, but when I started sharing some opinions over the last 2 years and realizing how susceptible I was to algorithms or platforms. I mean, the cancel culture and deplatforming people is out of control. And my biggest value is freedom. And I realized I can't speak about the things I truly want to speak about due to fear of losing revenue. Now, where's the responsibility to that? How do I navigate that? But I don't like the feeling of not being able to express myself. There is something that feels wrong to me about that. And that's when I got busy being like, I want to build multiple revenue streams. I want to have decentralized finance going. And even if you shut me off the face of the planet, I have different revenue in different places. And that to me is a feeling of freedom, to me, of course. And I think most people are sitting on something that's making money, but they could find ways to make extra streams of income without much more work.
Mm-hmm.
That's much more passive, dare I say. Leverage, like you said, is better. I think that's a really good idea. And I don't think it was talked about much because high ticket sales, and I was part of that movement, was the only way, high ticket sales. And I think it's awesome. But what if you could make high ticket sales because you want to, and you have some base
Yeah.
revenue streams coming from multiple different ways? And don't, if you put your nose up to $250 a month because five people bought your course at $50 a course, I question your intelligence over your financial IQ, because $250 a month for not doing anything, to me, is a pretty big deal. Like, it's a pretty big deal to me. I'm happy making $250 a month doing nothing, and if I can build up a bunch of those things, I don't know who would turn their nose up on that. But we live in the, but it's not a million, or it doesn't make me 50 grand. You don't say.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it is just for the person listening, kind of coming on this journey. I think the biggest thing that I can think of is I'm just trying to like pan back to our conversation because we covered so many different things, but I think it is just starting to change your perspective of how you approach business. Understanding that what we see bombarded by, like, from the media bombarding us with these messages around what we should make, what we should do, how we should run our business, that there is so many different ways to do it, trying to find the way that works for you, not trying to hit arbitrary targets for no reason other than you saw somebody else do it, trying to become more knowledgeable about running your business, how to run your business, the things that you're trying to achieve through all of this, and just being much more intentional with how you approach everything, I think is going to set people up for so much more success and happiness and fulfillment with what they're doing, because these conversations aren't being had. Like, people
Zero. Yeah.
barely talk about in business courses, like setting money aside for taxes.
Yeah, it's not sexy for sure.
Yeah, but it's like there's so much more to all of this that people aren't talking about, people don't even realize. And that maybe you don't want to go through that messy middle of making less money and you want to just make $7,000 a month, be happy,
Totally.
keep it nice and simple, do it yourself because you don't want to be a manager. There's nothing wrong
Totally.
with that, but there's also nothing wrong with having aspirations to do massive things. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But you're in for a road. There's going to be some things you have to learn, have to change, have to adapt in order to really make it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I also feel like I'm really, really big on this right now, so bear with me. But like that feeling you're after, because we're only doing it for a feeling at the end of the day, feeling of security, feeling of freedom, feeling of wealth or abundance or whatever that may be, feeling of options. I've really been working over the last year on cultivating. First of like, dude, I used a feeling wheel a year and a half ago, and I had to study the feeling wheel to understand the shades of feelings because I wasn't built that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, parents from communist Poland and like head down, don't feel emotion, and just execute. And that's a part of myself I really really love. When the shit hits the fan, I'm on. Like I can perform and I can handle large amounts of pain, but understand there's shades of different emotions. And if we don't have a word for an emotion, we literally can't associate or feel that emotion. And so studying different emotions and not letting emotions control me, because if you let emotions control you, you're literally dangerous. That's why people do really bad things out there. They don't know how to control their emotions. And mixing the decade of like stoicism work I did with a bit of a different approach to things, and just with a lot of Joe Dispenza's work, learning how to feel the desired outcome has literally changed my life. Is I can feel super abundant, super successful. It's even in the perception. Like it's cold in Vancouver, and I like wearing a t-shirt if it's like a 5 minute walk, because to me it's like a free cold exposure session, and I don't have to pay $150 for it. But I see people spend ridiculous amounts of money on cold therapy, but then if it's cold out and they have to walk to the cafe, they're complaining about it. It's just a perception. It's just perspective. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's crazy to me. Or they complain if there's no closed parking spot, but they'll sit 20 minutes walking on a treadmill at the gym. It doesn't make sense to me. It's just perception. So learning how to like tune to that every morning and then build from that place, the whole model of like be do have versus have do be,
Mm-hmm.
but the feeling of like becoming the person and seeing the world through the lens and the eyes of the person you want to become, and cultivating that and working on that on a daily basis, even if it doesn't, even if law of attraction is not real, it's not true, and it doesn't speed up the time to get the thing you want, the whole journey will just be more enjoyable because you're not working from desperation, you'd be working from inspiration. And even if it, I will tell you, it speeds it up massively, but even if it didn't for you, and all of this stuff is hocus pocus, I just feel like building a business, even if you have nothing in the bank account, but learning how to feel whole and abundant and complete already, is just a more enjoyable process. And it took me like 8 years to even think about learning that lesson, because I just kept going for more and more and more. And I realized I still feel so scarcity minded. Like I'm gonna, like, how will we pay the bills this month? And a guy a year ago was like, hey, let's count your net worth. And it wasn't massive. It was like 700 something thousand dollars liquid, like cash sitting around. He's like, so do you think you can pay the bills next month? Like my expenses in life are like 6 grand a month. Like I'm not a fancy person. And I was like, well, yeah. And they're like, well, you know, you can live like 8, 9 years off your savings right now. Why are you feeling so desperate? I was like, shoot, I need to work on this. And the more people I talk to, they haven't really worked on this yet. And so I feel like that's worth paying attention to, because if you feel desperate and scarce right now, you will probably keep feeling that way no matter how much money you make. The Big Leap is a great book to read that literally breaks that down
Awesome.
for you.
No, thank you so much. I think that is the perfect wrap up to everything in the conversation today. I really appreciate all of your insights. Super fun chat. Super fun having you on. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Len.
So I know you got a few things going on. So I'd love if you could just kind of share if people want to learn a little bit more about you, what you got going on. Just let people know where they can find you.
I've been kind of passionate. We're building this thing called the Zen Den. It's like a free community. You're familiar with Mighty Networks, but the Zen Den is sort of bringing everything together. I go live on Mondays just to talk about things, answer questions, whatever. It's totally free. You can access our book through the Zen Den. You can access our YouTube channels through the Zen Den. I think I'm starting a third YouTube channel. You commented on that post. I think I'm actually going to do it. So it's sort of like the central hub. You can subscribe to it and unsubscribe if you ever want to, or if it's too much or the notifications are too much. And all of that is just at lucasrubix.com. And we kind of deal on one side of the business around business, entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, that whole world, building online businesses. And the other one is in crypto DeFi. Definitely not for everyone, but those who are interested in it and share the kind of the values we share. I think that's cool to check out. And everything's just at lucasrubix.com.
Sounds good. I'll make sure I link that up, and hopefully, I'm sure there'll be a part two one of these days.